At the end of Volume 2, we left the old Port Road, the Dumfries to Stranraer Railway, at Newton Stewart, 49.5 miles from our starting point of Dumfries. Little evidence remains that Newton Stewart was once an important railway station. The old station site is now an industrial estate, and only the keenest of observers will spot the telltale remains of what was, in its day, a busy railway junction. On leaving the station, the Stranraer-bound train would pass under Princes Street Bridge, with the Wigtown and Whithorn branch separating to the left by the town's cemetery, before heading off into agricultural country, where little evidence remains today that a significant railway once ran here. Little of the trackbed is discernible today, but some farm roads retain their old bridges. Some 4 miles or so to the west of Newton Stewart, a minor road turns off to High and Low Glasnick farms, and here, in years gone by, a level crossing would have been encountered. The old trackbed is still discernible, just. Otherwise, only the house name remains to record the significance of the spot. The passer-by heading west along the present A75 road would be totally unaware that he was passing close to the route of the Paddy, the mail train serving Northern Ireland, as well as catering for travellers to that province before the motor car became the normal mode of transport. Not to mention the extensive needs of the military throughout 2 world wars. The line now had to cross the River Bladnoch, and did so by means of a single arch bowstring viaduct. I've been completely unable to find a picture of this bridge, which resembled the crossing of Lough Ken which we saw in Volume 2. But following the closure of the railway in 1965, the A75 road, little more than a country lane at this point, was rerouted along the old railway line, and the rail bridge was replaced by a simple road structure which now carries the heavy road freight traffic heading for Cairn Ryan and the Northern Ireland ferries. The route now headed southwest, paralleling the road to Kirkcowan, which it passed underneath shortly after crossing the River Bladnoch. The trackbed is still obvious, and the road bridge very much in use. As so often along the Port Road, Kirkcowan Station was hardly conveniently situated for the locals, being a substantial walk to the west of the village. Station Road is the road leading to the left in front of the church. Here we see Kirkcowan Station in 1937, and in its final year of operation, 1965. It was a passing place, where tokens would have to be exchanged with the signalman. During the lifetime of the railway, The road crossed the track by means of a right-angled bridge. Following the closure of the line and demolition of the buildings, the road was straightened to run right across the site of the old station, the final remains of whose platforms and goods siding can still be seen from the air. Beyond Kirkcowan station, little evidence of the railway remains accessible, apart from the last remnants of the bridge and embankment at Ballachray. The line continued its westward journey through sparsely populated country until it crossed the Tarf Water. The stretch of the A75 road west of Newton Stewart was the last to receive any upgrading and remained highly unsuitable for an arterial route. Much of it still is in 2023. One stretch of the old railway track was used to dual part of the carriageway in 2010. As the track descended into Glen Luce, it ran beside the old A75. The present road, bypassing the village, can be seen in the left distance. The heavily wooded area is the site of an old quarry, which once provided traffic for the railway. The quarry had its own siding, which had to be locked and unlocked by a porter sent out from Glen Luce station. The route of the old railway line is marked out yet again by trees, and from the air we can follow its path towards the station. Glen Luce Station, a major passing place with signal box and other necessary facilities, was for once conveniently situated just behind the main road, the A75, through the village. Little remains of its site today. Just beyond the village, the line crosses the Water of Luce by means of a structure which was, for most of its history, a distinctive landmark, but which today is largely hidden by trees. The minor road that follows the Water of Luce brings us shortly to Glenluce Abbey, founded around 1192. At the time of the Reformation, its Cistercian monks agreed to follow the new religion, and so the abbey was spared the destruction inflicted on so many others. The ruins have long attracted visitors, and before the motor car became universal, the railway must have brought many ramblers to the area. Immediately beyond the viaduct, the railway passes beside the Castle of Park, a Scottish tower house built in 1590 and improved in the 18th century. It's now used for holiday lets. The line now continued to East Challach, at the foot of Challach Hill, where it met the line from Glasgow via Ayr and Girvan. The signal box, curiously, was built to a Lancashire and Yorkshire railway design, the only such box anywhere outside L&Y territory. Life was complicated here in the early days, as different trains could be subject to the varying signal practices of the Portpatrick Railway, the Glasgow and South Western Railway, or the Caledonian Railway. The line between here and Stranraer was doubled to cope with the heavy traffic demands of the Second World War. Little remains here today to indicate that this was once an important junction. Only the curving track of the old Girvan and Portpatrick Junction Railway. The quarry access road here is built on the alignment of the old track from Dumfries and Newton Stewart. In 1895, a simple wooden platform, without shelter or buildings, was erected here to serve the newly opened Glenluce golf course. It was served by one train in each direction between Glasgow St Enoch and Stranraer each Wednesday and Saturday, but wasn't advertised to the general public because of the lack of safety precautions at the site. And you thought health and safety was a 21st century invention. Just beyond Challach Junction, the old A75 road passed beneath the railway by means of a notoriously difficult bridge. Heavy goods vehicles heading for the ferry port had to take a longer alternative route. This section of the road and the nearby village of Dunragit are now bypassed. Beyond the bridge, the old A75 road and the railway both travelled through Dunragit. When the Portpatrick Railway opened the line, no station was provided here. In 1861, a short platform was provided with a wooden shelter for passengers. In 1866, a passing loop was installed, but there was no signal box until 1877. The present signal box dates from 1927. To the east of the station was a creamery with its own siding operated, like the Glenluce quarry, by a porter sent from Dunragit. The station closed in 1965, along with the entire line from the ICI plant at Dumfries to Challach Junction, but the track remained in use as part of the Glasgow to Stranraer route. Today, the section between here and Stranraer is operated on the one-engine in steam principle. In 2023, 5 trains, normally 2-car Class 156 units, run between Ayr, Kilmarnock or Glasgow and Stranraer daily. All have to stop at Dunragit to hand over or collect tokens from the signalman. Just beyond the Dunragit bypass, the railway required a surprisingly substantial structure to cross the tiny Ballincollenty burn. Some 3 miles to the west, we come to Castle Kennedy. The original station building here burnt down in 1865 and was replaced by the structure which remains today as a private dwelling. Castle Kennedy was the site of the first aircraft landing in Galloway in 1913, but saw little use in either of the 2 world wars. Between 1955 and 1957, Silver City Airways operated a short-haul car ferry service from here to Newton in Northern Ireland, using Bristol Superfreighter aircraft. Although still open to light aviation, the airfield is little used today. As the port road finally approaches the edge of Stranraer town, a branch was built during the Second World War to a new deep-water port a few miles up Loch Ryan. There were real fears that Liverpool and Glasgow might be destroyed by aerial bombing, rendering them useless, and so an alternative was constructed and a rail link provided. Nothing much remains of this link today, apart from 1 or 2 bridge abutments. The port is now almost totally geared to road traffic. Rail passengers wishing to use the Cairn Ryan ferries have to travel by train to Ayr, and then take a rail replacement coach for the 1.5-hour journey to Cairn Ryan. Here we see the abandoned remains of the Stranraer ferry terminal, which ceased to operate in November 2011, whilst in the distance the Stena Line ship can be seen at the Cairn Ryan berth. This early Ordnance Survey map shows Stranraer before the railway arrived. Few people today can imagine how restricted life was for most people before the coming of the railways. Ordinary folk would rarely travel beyond walking distance from their homes. The wealthy might travel by horse-drawn coach, but bear in mind that Stranraer is 100 miles from the border at Gretna Green, whilst the original ferry port of Portpatrick is even further. Stranraer would provide railway services to Portpatrick, to Girvan, Ayr and Glasgow St Enoch, as well as to Dumfries, Carlisle and south to London. Clearly a substantial station was called for, and being so remote from any major centre of population, it had to be capable of handling all servicing, including even the most major of repairs. The boat trains to and from London and Glasgow ran into the Harbour station. All local services terminated in the more conveniently sited town station. Although located on the edge of town, the station was more easily situated for local people than the remote harbour station out on a pier on Loch Ryan. The line from Dumfries closed in June 1965, and the town station closed to passenger traffic the following March. In future, passenger trains from Glasgow would run to the harbour station. A diminishing freight traffic continued to operate into the town station until April 1994. The rails remained on site until well into the 21st century, but, alas, this was the state of affairs in 2022. When ferry sailings from Stranraer Harbour ceased in 2011, it would have made sense to reinstate the town station, rather than having passengers make their way home from an isolated and bleak pier. But plans were afoot to open a new supermarket on the site of the town station. These plans eventually came to nothing. Under the one-engine steam system, the signal box, although intact, is redundant. For any passengers not having access to a car, the walk from home to the station is very lengthy and must be a nightmare in winter with the rain driving in horizontally from the sea. Only one train per day, the 0704, is currently scheduled to run all the way to Glasgow, taking just over 2.5 hours. The relatively poor rolling stock is compensated for, at least in good weather, by splendid scenery. The line between Stranraer and Girvan is just another of Scotland's all too little-known scenic routes, well worth exploring, especially since with the ferry traffic gone, there must be some question hanging over its future. This last rump between Chalach Junction and Stranraer Harbour is all that remains of the once mighty Port Road, offering through services between southwest Scotland and London, with Royal Mail services, sleeping cars, restaurant cars, and all that once made railway travel something very special. So, let's have a last nostalgic look back at Stranraer Harbour Station in its very last week of operation, with the diesel multiple unit about to leave for Glasgow and the steam-hauled Paddy starting its long journey via the Port Road to the English border and south to London.
Which required 2 complete journeys on 2 contrasting days, with no opportunity of reshooting the offending sections. Any similarity between this and the BBC's film London to Brighton in 10 minutes is not accidental. Now let us board the afternoon Paddy and take the Port Road to Dumfries.
But to end Volume 3 on a lighter note, there is another railway in Stranraer which you might enjoy visiting if you're here during the summer holiday. Volume 4 in this series will deal with the line from Stranraer to the original harbour for Northern Ireland, Portpatrick. See you there.